call to order the Town of Shelburne Development Review Board meeting for Wednesday, February 19th, and welcome everybody. And I would like to invite anybody that's here in the audience, if you would sign in. We should have a sign sheet over there at that table, especially if you're going to be testifying. And before we proceed with the agenda here, I'd like to invite any comment from the public for any items that may not be on the agenda. Any comments? Okay, seeing none. Our next agenda item will be approval of minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Do we have a second? Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Please note that I didn't vote on
Abstain.
that because I
Okay.
wasn't present.
Very good. Okay. Next item, disclosures relating to any potential conflicts of interest. Any members of the board have any potential conflict of interest that they would like to bring forward? Is there anybody in the audience?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I could just address this. At the last meeting, I asked to be sworn based on
Yes.
some advice that had been given by the town's attorney.
Yep.
That came up in the context of the hearing that the Planning Commission is having on the ham radio tower.
Yep.
There has been some additional legal advice granted, and so as a result of that, I'm going to leave it to you whether or not I must be sworn. But if I am sworn, I will make a few brief remarks at that time.
Okay. I'd planned to actually swear you in based on last meeting, so I guess we'll
Okay.
continue with that.
Yeah, it's essentially to make it clear that even though I'm sworn, my participation isn't as a party.
Right.
Okay, duly noted. Okay, so seeing no other conflicts from the public, we'll move on with the agenda. And so before we do that, I think probably now is the time, Dean, for we'll swear you in because you'll be testifying on everything here. So, I always have to read this. Dean, do you swear or affirm that the evidence you give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do. And as I alluded earlier, my comments are offered independently and not as a party. The reason that I'm saying this is as a disclosure. In the event I write the decision or help the board write its decision, which is certainly possible, and in the event that any part of that decision references something that I say.
Okay. We noted. Okay, the first item is application BLA 20-01, and that application is to be continued to March 4th. And I think our course of action here is, I think we need a motion to approve continuance.
I would make a motion that we move application BLA 20-01 to the March 4th, 2020 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Seeing none, approved. Okay, next item, application sub 16-01R3, application by Scott Gardner for sketch plan review for 3-lot re-subdivision. Properties at 1036 and 1056 Falls Road are located in the Shelburne Falls Mixed Use District, Village Design Review Overlay District, and Stormwater Overlay District. Okay. Dean, would you like to comment, please?
Very briefly, this is an application seeking sketch plan review. It's very similar to one that you've seen before for the same properties. Scott Gardner had submitted a previous proposal that would have re-subdivided 2 lots into 4 lots, and he's revised that proposal and instead is proposing to re-subdivide the 2 lots into 3 lots. And the staff report included some boilerplate recommended conditions, which are there on page 9. And the substance of those is that the applicant would include evidence indicating the proposal has received its recommendation from the HPDRC and that there's a landscaping plan. That's in the event that the board recommends that the applicant can proceed. The other piece of this is that instead of it being a major subdivision, because 4 or more under the regs is a major subdivision, at 3 lots, it would be considered a minor, and that would mean that if you recommend it can go on to the next step, it would be going straight to final rather than to preliminary.
Okay. I think regarding the staff report, I'd just like to note maybe some corrections. On the front page, I believe it says that it's sub 16-01 R2. I think this is R3, not correct?
I will
Okay.
certainly note it, yes, okay, I see on the
It's on-
header, it says
on
R2 rather than R3.
R3, right.
Thank you.
Okay. And then on page 3, the 4-star comment, it refers to lots 3 and 4 shown on the plans, and we no longer have lot 4. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, do we have the applicant here for any comments? Yep, Scott? Okay, good evening. Both who are swearing in, do you swear or affirm that the evidence you give and the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Okay, take it away.
Well, thank you for seeing me again. I've been here a few times.
Yes.
But, just so you understand, the process that the town has created, I came with an idea. I thought it was the best idea, but, in working through and meeting with the various committees, we've come up with this idea. And I hope this is the best concept here. We'll see where it goes, but originally I was going to try to fit a triplex back there. You may remember that, it was last summer. There were a couple neighbors that, after I interviewed and talked to, didn't feel that comfortable about that concept, although this board said okay, or at least I was going to go to the next step. So then I tried putting 2 lots, which basically, just to understand, a point of clarification, there are actually 3 lots there that are existing today. And so we're not asking for new lots. We're kind of eliminating a driveway, and we're taking a large lot, lot 3, and adjoining a lot. This drawing doesn't show it, but there is currently a small lot back here, which is actually, it's got a building envelope that goes down just 50 feet back away from the floodplain, the high flood. This is all flat. Here's the river. This is all flat, big slope, full of trees. This is flat, and it slopes south. And we think the best place to put the buildings is right here. So right now, there's a building lot here. So there are actually 3 lots. There's a house here, which we're building now, a garage which has been built. There's a building lot here, and then there's this large lot that's 1036. And what we're saying is we want to kind of move the boundaries, get rid of the driveway, and have one driveway service these units. So that's what I'm asking for at this point.
So just, I apologize if part of that went over my head, but the lot in the back,
Yes.
that's a lot that you own.
It was created before I bought it, about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, no, I wasn't asking if you created it, I'm just saying
Yeah.
that it's yours.
It's my lot.
Okay. And there's already I think you said a building site that's on that lot?
Well, it's an approved building site, and I've got pictures, engineering drawings of it here. It's been approved, it was prepared by Civil Engineering Associates, and this body approved it 3 or 4 years ago, before I bought the property. It shows a house right here. And a septic tank here, a pump station that pumps up here.
So that goes away.
That goes away, because essentially what we're doing, I mean, it's a very narrow line. Here's the this boundary line is the property line now. I mean, you can't read this. If you look on your drawing, and this is the abandoned.
Yep.
So that lot disappears.
That's what I was trying to clarify, because
There's
I was
lot-
counting the number of lots and I was coming up with
Right.
4.
Lot
The reason it's
two-
3 is that the old one disappears.
Yeah, the old one disappears. So it's basically 3 lots that exist now that are getting the boundaries reconfigured.
Yeah, got it.
And one driveway's going away. We've already been through the historic committee. They agreed to allow to have the dilapidated buildings torn down. I've shown them, we've developed architectural plans to replace this structure, and they've approved it with a very attractive, historic-looking building. So we've already been through that. We've been through meeting with all the committees, various committees. You know, there's still a little hitch with the fire department wants a big wide driveway but we can get there. The engineers have drawn the driveway, showing the fire truck driving in and out at a narrower width than what the fire department. I don't know if you want to talk about that tonight, but I think that's the one issue that,
You bring that back on your final.
I mean, if you guys want a big wide driveway there, I'll go ahead, I'll put it right in. That's it. However wide you want it, I'll put it in there.
How wide is it now? It's 14 feet wide now?
14, Civil Engineering Associates has software with your fire department truck on it, showing it can easily be done at 14 to 16 feet and widening out the radiuses a little bit.
Okay.
And they've already, they're locked and loaded, ready to go, but I gotta wait for the next meeting for them,
Right,
I
you
think.
bring that in with your
Right.
historical
Yeah.
review written document.
But I can just tell you at this point, I've already been through it, we've met with the fire chief, and if people want to widen their driveway, that's okay. It affects stormwater a little bit,
Yeah, we don't want to go down that road.
so. But we've already got the stormwater, I've already been through, Wheeler from South Burlington's already reviewed all the stormwater things, so we're through all that,
I was just having trouble with the lot count, now I understand it,
Okay.
thank you.
Right,
yeah.
all right, I think I'm good.
Given I'm new to the board, if there was an existing building plan, does approving this immediately sort of negate that
The
as
reason
a
I
process?
The reason I raised the issue is because I didn't remember from our prior conversations that lot was going away. I was saying, wait, there are going to be a total of 4 lots on this property, not 3, so would it be a minor? But the answer is no.
Because we
This-
went back to
the-
3.
Right.
Right.
Going back to 3, and there's a lot of additions, things, really positive things. We're creating access for the front 2 lots to get back. I mean, this is really beautiful property back here, but we're creating right-of-way access back here so that people can use that property. We're not going to make it a public right-of-way. There was some concern with the Conservation Committee that there might be future development down there, but the septic system for the duplex, is down at the foot of the hill, and there's would really be no way to build anything down there. I think that's about it. I mean, I can't, we've been through this pretty thoroughly for a small job.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions from the board, comments? Any questions, comments from the public?
I have met with the neighbors on all sides, and I invited the neighbors to this meeting, the 2 adjacent, and they declined to come.
Okay, very good.
And any local objection.
Okay. All right,
Want me to make a motion?
I would,
motion please from anybody on the board.
I'll make a motion that the applicant's request be classified as a minor subdivision, and the applicant be authorized to file a final plan review application with the following recommendations. And for the secretary's purposes, I'm quoting directly from the recommended staff language. The applicant application must include evidence indicating the proposal has received a recommendation from the Historical Preservation Design Review Commission, and it must include a landscaping plan showing hardwood shade trees on both sides of the private access drive.
Okay, anybody second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
I think
nays?
we also need to, just a friendly amendment, we need to close the record as well. I don't know,
Oh, you're right, I'm sorry.
so just
bad.
so that's on the record, we're
That should have
closing the
preceded
record.
the other two elements of
Yep,
the motion.
just so we're up on all the housekeeping there.
Good.
Great, good luck.
Okay, next agenda item is application sub 20-01, application prepared by Barnard and Gervis on behalf of Kevin Dwyer for sketch plan review for a two-lot subdivision of properties at 6529 Spear Street is located in the residential district and Stormwater Overlay District. Dean, would you like to elaborate?
Again, very briefly, the staff report teased this up. This is a proposed subdivision. Some research was done to try to determine whether or not this lot was related to other lands that had been subdivided by the Hubbards on various occasions. It was not determined to be, so it's not a re-subdivision, it's a simple two-lot subdivision, a lot split for a property on Spear Street. It's somewhat analogous to a project that was proposed and approved a little bit south of this location. I did want to just highlight, this is an instance where some previous work is the reason why it's a slightly different format for the staff report. It's more tabular than the one that you just reviewed, and so this is kind of in the vein of the question I asked last time in terms of the board's preferences regarding the amount of material it receives for each application. And so yes, that was the board's preference at one time, and I think Revi got away from it. But like I said, this was very akin to one that had been developed previously. The only staff recommended condition relates to just making sure that the applicant has all of the required department head letters. And I've got a placeholder for any issues that might come up in the context of the hearing. And I understand at least one neighbor is present, so they may have some comments.
Welcome.
Good evening, Board.
Yep.
I'm Jason Barnard. I'm representing Kevin Dwyer.
Okay.
Barnard and Jarvis.
Okay, Jason, before we go on, I just need to
swear
swear
me
you
in?
in. Do
Sure.
you swear or affirm that the evidence you give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin would have liked to have been here tonight, but he had to fly to California 2 days ago to be with his son, is in the hospital. So he was a little bit bummed he couldn't make the meeting. But very nice staff report, by the way. I went through that a couple of times, and that's very well done. As you can see, the existing property that is the bold dark line, that is about 5.5 acres in size. The existing residence is already served by the municipal sewer private line that does come up through and traverses the back side of the property off, but does have an easement for it and heads out towards the Mac Farm development. That is connected. It has an on-site water supply well already. Access to the property, after just a step back one little bit, Lot 2 would be 1.76 acres in size. It would have a separate access off of Spear Street. I think the application that you were referring to, Dean, was the Kirkpatrick one, just south of here. So when I met with Kevin, we looked at what he wanted to do for a proposal. Basically just keep it relatively simple, straight lot lines, reconnect to the sewer that was there already on site, drill another well for lot number 2. The existing infrastructure, we'd have to go through and start the wastewater permitting process once we get through with the sketch plan in the review here tonight. So relatively simple. We have looked at the access location for lot 2. There is about 320 feet of site distance to the north and greater than 500 feet to the south. We have not yet applied for the road application permit or working the right-of-way permit, but we were gonna do that right after we met with you guys tonight in case things needed to change a little bit. So overall, the property we do have on the zoning district boundaries, the sideline, front yard setbacks, the orthos are there, which give a good presentation of the surrounding area, which is primarily residential. The goal, when we talked with Kevin, was to keep the house closer to the road, sort of in that same street line as the existing house. What that does is allow the backyard to be open space for each parcel where there is plenty of room out back for that, you know, for a family or activities, recreation. No easements proposed in terms of, the only easement would be the proposed sewer line, which basically runs in a northeast direction, would connect to the existing sewer. That would have to cross lot 1.
There was a comment staff report regarding maintenance of that line.
Yes,
Did you
I
read
saw
that?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments on that?
I don't have any comments. Just to give you a little history, I started working with Alan Kirkpatrick on his, and I think he may have started the process looking at putting together the association for the sewer, and it didn't get any traction.
No, it hasn't.
No. So that was one thing I can talk about with Kevin, and I don't think he's approached any of the
Okay.
current.
Yeah, please.
At the Public Works meeting this morning, this topic came up. There's another place in town where there are homes that are served by a private line, and what I understand is that the town is going to be issuing a letter to the people who are the users of that private line. And I'm not sure, I haven't seen the wording of the letter, but it may be giving them a little push in the direction of creating something, an association. And the gist of the conversation was, this morning, was that a similar letter may be drafted for the parties that are users of this line.
Okay.
And to try to get that ball rolling.
My impression is that particular issue arose before the Water Commission, of which I'm a member. And I think I can accurately state the Water Commission felt emphatically there had to be some form, although they were neutral on what, of financial assurance that the town would not end up directly or indirectly being stuck with those expenses. And I'm certainly open to being persuaded of a different point of view, but speaking for me and not the board,
Sure.
that's my own view in this case. I'm neutral on whether the best way or most acceptable way to do that is through an association or not, but I think there has to be something better than between the two property owners and the town will work it out in the future. That's what happened in the other event, and it's horribly complex and has created a great deal of, I think, unnecessary work.
You mean in the other event in terms of the Kirkpatrick subdivision, or?
The matter I'm thinking of actually deals with a supply line instead of a waste line, and it came before the Water Commission.
Okay.
And there were several properties that could have been in an association but weren't.
Okay.
And there's a huge amount of back and forth between whether or not the property owners, that there was a leak in the property that because of the loss of water, the town repaired immediately.
Yep.
So the town incurred the expense. And the question is, who reimbursed the town? And all the other stakeholders have their hands pretty firmly stuck in their pockets saying, not us.
Okay.
And while I think that will ultimately resolve one way or the other, there has to be a better process to get to that answer than the one we're using there.
Sure. Sure.
So one of the, again, if I may, one of the key reasons why I was interested in exploring whether this was a re-subdivision was the possibility that it would establish a larger jurisdiction.
Right.
And if there had been a larger jurisdiction, the board might have some leverage to apply a condition that would affect more than just this one individual.
Yep.
But in this instance, if there was a condition, and the idea of applying a condition to this one particular property that's proposed to be subdivided, I think that's 1 out of maybe 8 or 9, because the lots across Spear, also 3 of those benefit from it as well.
From the sewer
So it's a way of incrementally addressing it, But again, this is a separate parcel.
No. I'd obviously rather not force a solution down anyone's throat. But I'm equally adamant that I don't want, by default, the town, either through legal expenses or other, to have to spend money when they really shouldn't need to.
Sure.
So I will listen with open ears and an open mind to any suggestions that you have about how to address that.
My suggestion is the HOA would probably be the best way to do it, and establish a board with a president and secretary, and then at least vote on it. If something does happen, then everybody is responsible. They can
At least we
have a treasurer,
process.
and you know who to contact.
Right, I mean, at least there would be a process.
Exactly.
Exactly. Off the top of my head, I agree with you, but between now and the final plan, you've got lots of time and opportunity to come up with alternatives.
Sure. Now, that makes the most legal sense. But I'll certainly pass that along to Kevin. I mean, he can have us do that, or he can pursue it. I know, so like I said, some of the work was done prior or started with the HOA when I think Alan was starting his subdivision just south of here. So
So you're saying there is an association or one in the works?
there was not.
There is not.
There was not. And I think Alan contacted, I'm sure, did he contact you guys when? He raised the idea. Okay, he told me he contacted everybody or most everybody that was on the sewer line, and he, some things he got dead air on the end of the line, and a few people that were interested, so.
It's a hard thing to sell for people that aren't in one now and don't see the reason to join.
Right.
But the town kind of picks up the pieces if things go south in the future, and
Yeah.
those are the two interests we're trying to balance out.
And would the town, in terms of being a supply line and loss of water, but would the town be responsible if it was a sewer break and it was backing up into the homes or backing up into the manhole? I mean,
I don't know. But
Okay.
on the supply side, you're right, life is kind of simple. We buy the water from South Burlington.
You don't wanna-
So every gallon that spills, no matter whose fault it is, no matter
You're
whose
fixing
property
it.
it's on, comes out of the town.
right,
So the easy process is to stop the leak.
yeah.
But then the issue comes up with, okay, who should pay for that?
Correct. And in a case like this, it's just not as easy to get traction to get this thing.
So it may be worth rethinking and coming up with a different approach. I was just throwing out
Sure.
a preliminary opinion. You shouldn't take that as a,
Nope, I appreciate it. Len, we'll certainly research it and get back to you and talk to Kevin. And, I'm in agreement with the board. I do think that's the best course moving forward. It's too bad when those HOAs don't get established and those agreements aren't in place with the original subdivision. It's always hard to go back after the fact.
The agreement that is in the land records that's included, a copy is included in the packet, where Oda Hubbard indicates that the applicant would have permission to use the line. The top of the second page does include this paragraph that says it's anticipated that an association may be formed to take over and
Yep.
so on. So at least from her perspective, she's prepared to have everything turned over to an HOA once created.
a completely different alternative to solve the problem, at least from my perspective. If someone persuades me that if there's damage or a significant leak in that line, that all of the cost and liability is going to be privately, forgetting who, will be privately held, and the town will have no direct or indirect responsibility for the mess, then we have no problem to solve. But that certainly wasn't the case in the supply side.
And it doesn't solve the problem, it merely does a little hands-off, but the problem still exists.
Correct. And you may have an HOA that doesn't have everybody on board. I mean, it may be a partial too. That's sort of the downfall, but
Yeah, it's
you know,
complicated.
it
So-
is.
So we can all think about it.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Dean, you have any additions to that?
No. I have nothing more to cover.
Okay.
Questions, comments, board members? Comments, questions from the audience?
Sure.
Do you have more to,
Yep.
I need to come up?
Yeah, we need to come up
Do
and,
you have more that you're going to talk about? in regards
I can address comments after you.
So,
Sure.
you can swear me in.
okay. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and your name for the record?
Diane Olekna.
Okay,
Yes. So my husband and I live to the south of the property. And my husband will probably come up and ask some questions too. In regard to the sewer line, just some technical questions. How many properties can join that private line, given the 4-inch
It's an
diameter?
8-inch, actually, it's an 8-inch sewer. We actually pop some of the manholes back there. If you do the calculations based on fixture value, that 8-inch sewer can handle a lot of flow.
How many?
Haven't gone through all the numbers yet. More than the homes that are on there now.
Okay, and there's more homes being proposed across the street?
There's 3 or 4 across on Spear Street that go to it, and, yep, and then there's the one that Alan had done prior to.
Right. So I understand, and I have the same concern that you do, John, about this is a problem. And I really appreciate the town helping us with this problem because with Mr. Kirkpatrick, Alan, you know, he did spend some time saying we really need to think about forming an association. And I don't know who else is on our line, and our neighbors are our neighbors, but I don't know them. So we would really need help in moving that forward, very structured help, you know, with exactly how does this all work. So that's one question that I have. The other question, this site is adjacent to a historical site. It's not classified as such. It's part of the Mech Farm original farm, and it dates back to 1780.
Sure.
You had represented, I think, to me that it was one of the oldest houses in Shelburne. That was
Yeah.
And that's
your
the,
record.
and that's the existing home.
Right. So I think it is the second oldest home in town. And so for future development, just to be mindful, even though we're outside of the criteria for the, what's the right term for? Historical. We're up on the hill, so we don't quite qualify. But I think it's really prudent to give consideration for the type of home that would be placed there. And I see in the specs, you're looking at a 35-foot home?
It's basically, when we come through with a sketch plan, that's just sort of a template. There's no architectural stuff done yet.
Oh, I thought I read the height, the total height would be
Well, that's a restriction.
That's a restriction. And that's
Can't
on,
be higher than.
can't be higher than, that's the maximum height.
35 feet.
That's the maximum allowable building height.
Okay, all right. So, and just to be mindful, that is all ledge, so there's more blasting that would go on. We've had blasting with Mr. Kirkpatrick's land. We've had blasting across the street with the new house going on the other side. And just the amount of work that's involved with that. And I know that has nothing to do with you wanting to, you know, sell the property and divide it. But just things to consider that as neighbors, I wish other neighbors had come, but I think it's just important to be mindful of putting a house so close to a historical house that has been beautifully redone by Mr. Dwyer and his former wife. So that's all I have for right now.
Thank
I
you.
think my husband may have some questions.
do you swear or affirm that the evidence you give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes.
And state your name for the record.
My name
please.
is Dennis Olekna, and that's my wife Diane, and we live just to the, well, we're to the south of the Dwyer home. And really, the only question I really have is, my wife and I bought this house in November of 2010. And from the moment we bought the house and talking to the neighbors, Mr. Kirkpatrick and Mr. Dwyer and his former wife, everybody was under the impression that the land was the land. That's it. Nothing else can be built on it. You can't divide it up or do any of that sort of stuff. Everybody kind of believed all that. And everybody was surprised and still scratching their head when Mr. Kirkpatrick was able to cut off about 1 3/4 acres, which is to the south of us on the other side, They got all that done. And so anyways, I've been looking through all the material that we had when we bought our house. It's got the deed and tons of financial information and papers and things of that sort. Anyways, I was looking, I don't have a title for this thing. I don't know why, what happened. We own the house outright, but we had our lawyer, when we closed on the house, she and her team did an attorney's report and opinion on the title. And the only thing I want to just raise to people's question that I have is that they have a section 5, which is called protective covenants, other restrictions on record, and it goes on with a number of things. Amended agreement regarding restrictions between Stephen Pollock, Sally Pollock, and all these other things goes to talk about certain things with the Barbers and the Gillises. But the question, the thing that got my attention is at the end it says, the amended agreement clarifies the location of the no building site area and the area subject to the one building restriction in those areas designated on a plan recorded in map slide 104A. So the point is, our land was lot 18 or whatever it is, and based on what I'm reading, this thing is, there's only one building, which means one house, which I'm interpreting as, I can't hack 2 acres off my land or 4 and try to sell that for somebody else. And so if it's on my record of when I bought the house, I wonder what it looks like when the Dwyers end up buying their house, or even when Kirkpatrick bought his land before he built his thing, which was all around 1995, which was way before we were here. We were not in the area. So that's the only thing I raised. It just seems, it's the only evidence, it's not evidence per se, but we're not necessarily all that happy. We're getting sandwiched on one side with another thing, because we've got 5 acres of land. Dwyer's had almost 6. Kirkpatrick had about 6. And everybody's telling us how this is the way it's gonna look forever, and nothing's gonna change. And now I got this big one house on the other side, and this other thing's moving to the other side, which doesn't necessarily make us feel all that happy. I guess, it's not gonna invade our land, but we gotta look at when we look out the kitchen windows to see all these other things. So anyways, just raise that for you. And if there's something that you can look up, Mr. Pierce, on whether or not this is in everybody's thing or in ours, I have no idea what this stuff is. I can give you a copy of this if you'd like. Maybe I'm just misreading things. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything about houses other than I bought 2 in my life, and that's about it.
Yep.
So anyways,
Well, I
that's all I
think,
have.
wouldn't that, any restrictions be in the deed for that property, the Dwyer's property, or?
It's possible that, and I'm not certain. I'd be interested in seeing the document that you were just reading from, but again, one of the key reasons for determining whether or not this lot was part of any previous subdivision was to be aware of any potential conditions that would have restricted re-subdivision. And that there wasn't evidence found that this lot was like some of the other lots around that had had some restrictions on further subdivision. So that's the first thing. I haven't read the deed for the property, but I would also say that if there just happened to be a covenant on the deed addressing subdivision, the town would not necessarily and likely wouldn't be in the position to enforce that covenant. It would be someone else. The errors, it would not necessarily be something to the town. I'm not aware of any such covenant. It certainly would be a reasonable question to ask. We can find out in 5 minutes by pulling it up on the computer, but I suspect there isn't.
We pull the deeds as part of doing the survey, doing the land records.
Right.
We ordinarily don't even do that until after sketch plan, but with this one, we started talking with Dean, we had my surveyor go out, pulled the deeds. The Mac farm was not part of the original Act 250 application. That looks like the covenants that were in that original Act 250 application. This lot was actually subdivided out first before the rest of the subdivision was done, so that actually is not fall under jurisdiction with that Act 250 permit. So I'm not aware of covenants on Mr. Dwyer's property. We obviously have to go and we research the deeds back to creation, so if they're there, we'll find it. We do have the deed on file. We did take this one back a little further just to verify when we started talking with Dean, but it doesn't appear as though there are any restrictive covenants, no further subdivision, no build zones with the Dwyer parcel. That looks like, I've seen those covenants, and they were part of the Act 250 we did research, because we started with Alan doing his stuff, and that looks like the covenants as part of the Mac Farm subdivision. But we're gonna verify all that.
That's all I have. Thank you. Thank you.
I do have one more question.
Sure.
So the Act 250, I'm just trying to understand Act 250. Does it have to do with also wildlife usage?
They have criteria, and I guess I can explain if you want. So Act 250 is a land use permit that has certain criteria. Your property, Mr. Kirkpatrick's, the surrounding properties are all subject to that Act 250 permit because it was done at a time when they created more than 9 lots. But this parcel appears as though it was split out before the first subdivision was done, and doesn't fall under Act 250 jurisdiction.
It doesn't, even
Yep.
today, there aren't new requirements for wildlife
This
Passage.
doesn't fall under Act
Doesn't.
250.
at all?
Yes, does not.
Okay, because wildlife do use that passage. So,
Out towards the back of the house?
yep, right through where that house will go. It's a
So-
major passage for deer, for bobcat, for fox, for coyotes, so just to be aware.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
If I may. One of the requirements the applicant will need to fulfill is to get letters from department heads and from the Natural Resources Committee. And the Natural Resources Committee, when presented with the plans, will look at the Agency of Natural Resources, Natural Resource Atlas. They'll look at different resources in an effort to determine whether or not there's any previous understanding that an area is used by wildlife. There are requirements in the subdivision regs in section 800 that would apply generally. They're somewhat softly worded standards, such as whether the land is, whether a proposal gives due regard for the preservation and protection of natural resources, I'm simplifying, and historical resources. So the board would have an opportunity to investigate with the applicant, have you given due regard if there is a resource that's determined? So there's an opportunity later for this to be examined.
And like Dean described, and we design a subdivision, we look at the A&R Atlas. That's one of the best tools that there is going, and it's helpful, and we have looked at it. I don't recall that there was a wildlife corridor through that particular part of the property. I'm not saying that there isn't, but it's certainly one thing that we're gonna look
It's
at.
not huge, but there are.
Okay.
There are.
Okay, further comments, questions? Board? Do we have a motion?
I did the last one, come on, someone else.
All right, Mark.
I would first make a motion to classify application SUB 20-01 as a minor subdivision. I would also make a motion to finalize the record, close the hearing, and authorize preparation of a final plan application for SUB 20-01 with the following condition: that they obtain comments from the appropriate departments as required by section 600, item 28.
Second.
Okay. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays?
Thank you.
Okay, next item, application BLA 20-02, application by Christopher Fisher and Richard Miller for a boundary line adjustment between 2 adjacent parcels. Properties at 165 and 175 Lakeview Drive are located in the mixed-use district and stormwater overlay. Dean, take it away.
This is a boundary line adjustment. Boundary line adjustments are reviewed under a section of the subdivision regs that provide for a simpler expedited review process, a one-step review. This project qualifies for it. The plan was prepared by a local surveyor, and there really wasn't any room for or need for a recommended condition. It's simply, the staff recommendation is simply to have the applicant reminded that they need to have the survey recorded within 180 days, because if they fail to meet the 180-day deadline, then all this is for naught, and they will need to repeat the step. But the staff report provides an explanation of the location of it. It's essentially an adjustment that would allow one of the parties to build an addition that I believe is intended for an accessory apartment, and have that addition comply with the side yard setback requirement.
As I recall, Dean, it was the staff's conclusion that there was nothing about the proposal that would increase nonconformity.
That is our position, yes.
Okay.
Welcome. Would you like to?
Yes, excuse me.
Are you okay?
No, those things will do.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Great. And your name for the record?
Christopher Fisher.
Okay.
So, so you can see it's basically a small adjustment with our neighbor there. As Dean mentioned, we would like to, the idea of putting on a garage towards the back of our property with an accessory dwelling unit above that. But in order to meet any of the criteria for that, for setbacks, about the only way to do it would be with a boundary line adjustment. We approached our neighbor about it a couple months ago, and surprisingly, he was agreeable to it. So, yeah, so we've kind of worked out an agreement already, but basically it's contingent upon approval from the review board. And in the adjustment, you may have noticed there it's not a complete line following the whole way. We narrowed it back down to 0 at the road frontage, so it took away no road frontage from the other property. It still leaves the larger lot conforming. It doesn't reduce the size with that. And I think there's really not a lot more to say about it, yeah.
Questions, comments from the board?
No.
No. Okay. We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to finalize the record, close the hearing for application PLA 20-02. Make a motion, indicate approval. Move to direct staff to indicate approval for boundary line adjustment, prepared by Warren Robenstein, LS, on behalf of Christopher Fisher and Richard Millar for the properties located at 165 and 175 Lakeview Drive with the following conditions. The Mylar of the plat shall be recorded within the 180 days of approval pursuant to town subdivision regulation section 1030.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
So I have a question with that, because the plans that were submitted were preliminary, not for filing. So now is it just a matter of my surveyor presenting the Mylar for the town recording, is that correct?
Yeah. It need to be presented, and that's the reason why it can't, there was no decision prepared along with this. If everything is in order, it's, the boundary line adjustment process is supposed to be simplified and expedited so that you actually walk away with a decision. The reason, or one reason why no decision was prepared is that you aren't ready. So yes, he will need to submit a lot of Mylar. It will need to be presented to the chair, who will endorse it
Okay,
before it can be recorded.
okay.
So don't wait until day 179
Okay.
and hope that the signature will come in.
Okay, all right. So basically, I can just let him know, go ahead and...
Make it pretty.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you all.
Good luck.
Okay. Do we have any other business for adjourn, or shall we adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye.